look for.
We got an early one today.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. This week's Torah portion is Parshat Toldot, in which we begin with Eile Toldot Yitzchak ben Avram, Avram holy det Yitzchak. These are the generations or the happenings, because the word Toldot can signify both. Toldot being what comes out of, what is birthed from this. Now, that could be either generations or it could be the events, the circumstances, or the results of somebody, i.e., their history or their happenings. So these are the children of Yitzchak ben Avram, or the happenings of Yitzchak ben Avram. But then the Torah says, and Yitzchak ben Avram, Yitzchak the son of Avraham, Avraham holy that Yitzchak, Avraham birthed Yitzchak. We said that is obviously quite redundant. If it's Yitzchak ben Avraham, then obviously it's Avram that holy that Yitzchak. If it's Yitzchak the son of Avram, then it's clear that it's Avram that birthed Yitzchak. So why, when the Torah is never redundant, is it all of a sudden redundant in this case? So the commentaries jump all over this, and one of the explanations is that the Torah was very sensitive to what the scoffers were saying. The scoffers were saying that here Avraham and Sarah have lived together for decades and decades, half a century at least. They've been living together and no children. Now all of a sudden, Avraham and Sarah have to pass through Gerar, and Sarah gets taken to Avimelech's palace. Right now, she's absconded to Avimelech's palace. Now we know that the Torah informs us that nothing happens to her, right? And that Avimelech is visited by God in a dream and told, "Don't touch her. I'll be very bad for you if you do." And so he returns her entirely intact. But the scoffers don't know. They just know that she is abducted, spends one night with Avimelech, and all of a sudden she's pregnant with a child. So many of the scoffers will say that this is not Avram. This Yitzchak ben Avraham is really not Avraham's child. This Yitzchak ben Avraham is born to Avimelech. So Hashem went out of his way to make the face of Yitzchak very similar. The visage of Yitzchak was nearly identical to Avram, so it was clear to everybody that this is Avraham's child. So Yitzchak ben Avraham, and everybody saw clearly that Avraham holied as Yitzchak, that Avraham birthed Yitzchak. So that's one explanation as to why it says Yitzchak the son of Avraham, Avram who birthed Yitzchak. But there's a second explanation, which says that quite a poignant and nice thought, that this was Yitzchak ben Avraham. Then if you would ask Yitzchak who he was, he would proudly tell you, "I am Yitzchak the son of Avraham." Yitzchak was very proud of his father Avraham. But that pride didn't just go one way, it was reciprocal. Because if you would turn to Avram and ask him who you are, he would say, I am Avram, Sheholidus Yitzchak. I am Avraham who birthed Yitzchak. He would proudly say, I am Avram, the father of Yitzchak. So to show that the pride went in both directions, that Yitzchak was Yitzchak ben Avraham. Who was he? He was Yitzchak, the son of Avram. He was very proud of his father, Avram. And who was Avram? Avram, holy this Yitzchak. I am Avram, who's so proud to be the father of this boy, Yitzchak. That both sides were particularly proud of each other. Now, the thing is that that's a beautiful thought, it's a poignant thought, but what's the lesson and message to us is that the Torah is going out of its way to tell us this, that Avram was proud of Yitzchak, or rather Yitzchak was proud of Avram, and that Avram was proud of Yitzchak. Why is this such important information? What do we learn from this? And I think it ties back to, and guys, we're all caught up now, so
Okay, I'm back.
refocus, that that we have to remember that Avraham is not living a private life. Avraham is a person who every second of his day, of his conscious and even his subconscious, his wake time, his sleeping time, is totally and utterly permeated and devoted to his mission and his purpose and his raison d'etre. This is a man with singular focus, and that is that to spread the awareness of God to every corner of the world. He was on this gig since he was 3 years old, and he stays on this gig to the last day of his life. It is the thing that he's most concerned about, the main reason why he wants to have children, and his biggest effort in raising those children is for them to carry this legacy forward. It's his breath. It's the reason that he wakes up in the morning. It's the reason he goes to sleep at night. So this is not just the family business, right? This is his calling. This is his mission. This is his everything. Now, many businesses are called, let's say, Bill and Sons, right? Right? Because it definitely is something that a father is very proud to do, is to bring the children into the family business. And there's always, when it's handed to the next generation, right? Where the sons take over the business, the and sons, right? The and sons are now, Bill is no longer running the business. It's the and sons that are running the business.
Right.
And that is oftentimes fraught with tremendous amount of strife. Why? Because not very often the vision of the son who takes over the business or the daughter who take over the business is very different than the parent who ran the business originally. Right? Maybe the parents' approach was, we're going to have a whole bunch of corner stores, right? Where people with all the people's with this with the relationships and friendliness, whatever it is. And so for years built up, let's say, a chain of drugstores where people come in, they have a chat, they get to sit by the soda fountain, and it's all right. It created this legacy. Then the child takes over the business, closes down all the stores, goes entirely online, right? And then online retail. You can imagine that when you go and you took the business 180 degrees in the other direction, that there might be a little bit of strife, right? Maybe Bill is no longer happy with Ann Sons, right? I said, what did you do? This wasn't the business model. This wasn't the approach, right? I did, and the child's going to answer, "Pops, get with the times, right? This is the way we do it, right?
Right.
You did it this way. It worked for you in your time. You handed it over to me. This is the way I see it, and this is the way we're going to do it, right?"
They're both legitimate.
They're both legitimate, but in that change, and they can imagine the more somebody invests, not just in a sense their goal of making a couple of bucks, but the more they put themselves into it, the more it becomes more than a business, but it becomes a calling and etc. and a mission. The more they will be sensitive to any type of change that is foisted upon it by the next generation. Right? What happens if this person who opened the business, because if it was entirely business, then we can imagine that the fellow says, "Oh, you took it entirely online." Well, I didn't, that wasn't the way I would have done it. But then the child comes and says, "Yeah, but look at our quarterly earnings, right? Oh, wow, okay, wonderful, right? Because if it's entirely business, then wonderful. As long as you're showing that you're turning a profit or even a greater profit, okay, then good. Then we have the same goal in mind, right? And you're achieving the goal that way. Fine, I'm on board. But what happens if again, if for the father, this was a calling, right? It was the idea. He had this vision of people coming together, gathered around that soda fountain and whatever it is, and schmoozing with the pharmacist and having that little moment of, maybe that helps the pharmacist have insight into what ails them, and so the prescription is a little bit more accurate and all that kind
By
of
the
stuff.
way, you're describing my grandfather's drugstore.
See, I knew that. So that's why I chose that metaphor, right? I actually went to that drugstore. No, just kidding. But either way, the point being that then you can understand that perhaps the earlier generation would have a little bit more pique about what the direction that the next generation has taken this. It's cold, it's impersonal, there isn't that corner store. It's I don't like this. I don't like anything about it. I don't like what you did here, et cetera, et cetera. You can imagine that happens probably on a daily basis all around the world, right? In the meantime, the child says, "Hey, look, you know what? I'm sorry that you don't see it that way, but this is again, as we said, this is the way the way of the world. People don't want to walk into their corner drugstore. They're closing doors all up and down, everywhere in the world. And this is the way people want it. And you're providing with them what they're losing in interpersonal relationships. They're gaining in convenience and accessibility, and et cetera, et cetera." So arguments are made in directions, but it doesn't mean that to a certain degree there's not a little bit of that angst because you went in a very different direction than I did. Now, let's apply this to Avraham Enterprises, right? Or Avinu Enterprises, because right, that's what they all have in common, right? Avinu Enterprises, we are here to establish the Jewish people and their mission, etc. Avraham has a business model that has proven incredibly effective. He has forever left his mark on the world, and we know that he will leave it for all eternity, right? He goes, and this man is out there. Everybody knows him. He's travels, he doesn't settle. He's never in any place for too long. He's got, there's a city right there, but he chooses to not live in the city. He is settled. He is out there on the main thoroughfare with a tent that has stores in 4 different directions. And he is touching tens of thousands of people and bringing tens of thousands of people to monotheism. And he's built this incredible legacy all around, this outreach that he does and his effort to really not waste one opportunity, even when convalescing from his bris milah. The fact that he can't immediately find somebody that he can work with has him in such a state that he's sitting outside by the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. So where God finally has Rahmanas on him and sends him somebody that he can pester. I mean, host, right? And in the end, this is Abraham. This is Abraham. He loves minding everybody else's business in the best of ways, right? But this is him. Then he turns around and he says, "My son Yitzchak, here are the keys to my entire enterprise, to my entire calling, to this eternal effort that we are beginning here." And Yitzchak says, "Thank you. All right, we're not budging anymore. No outreach. Forget it. We're staying in the land of Canaan. We're not going anywhere else. We're not going to be reaching thousands and thousands of people. We're just going to be working on 2, and they happen to be my kids. And that's my approach."
It's another question he's answering, which is such an important one. When the charisma is gone, how do you teach what is core, and not have it be about the charisma of the individual?
So one second, that thought. So Yitzchak does this in the exact opposite way of his father. Everything that Avram did in this direction, Yitzchak comes at it in this direction. Avraham travels, Yitzchak stays put. Avram reached tens of thousands. Yitzchak's working with 2 people. Avraham is kind of doing surface-like, right? He meets these people once in the tent while they're traveling. So he's not even trying to get them in their settled circumstance. He's not coming and establishing a yeshiva in a city with longevity, whatever it is. He's catching people for brief moments because I don't even have the time to continue to sit with you. I got to catch the next guy. So I'm going to drop some information on you and we're going to move on to the next. And Yitzchak is chofer be'eros. Yitzchak is the well digger. His whole attitude is, I'm going to dig and dig and dig and dig in you till I get down to the good stuff, right? Your Avram is superficial, Yitzchak's in depth, which means I'm not going to have time to work with tens of thousands of people. I sacrifice that element to work with deep within individuals. Okay, very, very different approach. You can imagine that after a couple days, Avraham is like goes and he knocks on Yitzchak's tent and says, hey Yitzchak, um, I don't mean to pry and and to nose into your business. I handed this over to you, so I'm sure you have it. I trust you entirely, but um, you haven't hit the road yet at all. Like, or even opened your tent up to people. Like, what's your numbers? Zero. I thought it's zero. I can't imagine that it's actually zero that you people that you worked with this week. I mean, like, okay? So what's your plan for tomorrow? Yeah, I'm going to work with zero other people. Okay, about the day after that? Yeah, zero.
Probably zero.
It says so. When do you plan on going on the road? Is it a week? Is it a month? Nope, never. So you can imagine that after a while, Abraham and Yitzchak are not seeing eye to eye because they don't see eye to eye. And yet, the Torah tells us Yitzchak ben Abraham, Yitzchak, with his own unique, diametrically opposite vision than his father, what made him so proud is to be his father's son. Who am I? I'm Yitzchak ben Abraham. And Abraham, who has a diametrically opposite vision than his son Yitzchak. If you ask who I am, I'm the father of that young man. I am Yitzchak ben Avram. I am Avraham holy Yitzchak, which means that even though they didn't approach it this way, they were able to understand, had the capacity to appreciate the other end of the spectrum and understand and respect the devotion and the correctness and the validity of an approach that was entirely opposite from their own. That is such an important message. You see, Avram was the paragon and the very definition of kindness. And Yitzchak was the paragon and the very definition of strength and discipline. And neither of them is right or wrong. They're both just two approaches, each one of them with the advantage or disadvantage that they each have. And so Abraham's approach yields this kind of result, and Yitzchak's approach yields this kind of result, and the results are going to be very different.
That's the chesed and gvura.
Yes. And Avram says, yeah, I've done it all this way all my life, and that's the way I'm comfortable with, and I'm predisposed to do it, and so that's my path to walk. And the divine and the mission was very well served by my approach. But I don't doubt that there's another way to do this. In fact, it might be a way that is diametrically opposite of the way that I've been doing this, and it could serve the goal and the purpose just as much. In fact, one is complementary to the other, because it's not about me and it's not about you, and both of us know that. So even though we have to pick the way we're going to do it, neither one of us are serving ourselves and our own sensibilities. Both of us are serving a greater cause, a transcendent cause, which means that even though I am seeing you do it entirely different than I would have, it doesn't mean that I believe you're doing it wrong. I'm actually fascinated and proud that you're bringing an element that I could otherwise never bring to it. And so Abraham is far prouder of Yitzchak because Yitzchak's doing it differently. And Yitzchak is far prouder of Abraham because Abraham was doing it, something that Yitzchak knew he never would have been able to do. And so Abraham and Yitzchak are proud of each other, not despite their differences, because of their differences. They have the humility and the greater sense of transcendent purpose that makes them proud and actually welcoming and cherishing of the other approach. This is also why Hillel and Shammai are arguing on every page of the Talmud. That teaches you two things about Hillel and Shammai. Number one, that they each stood on their principles. They were very robust in their approach and very strong in their approach. So Hillel, you could almost always know how Hillel is going to side on a particular matter. He was very confident in the validity and the correctness of his approach. He stuck to it through his entire life. And Shammai, even though Shammai kept on losing, the halacha generally is in Hillel's fashion. Shammai never stepped away from his perspective and his approach. Both sides were absolutely committed to the way they saw it out. And yet, Hillel and Shammai never, ever, ever allowed it to become about themselves. And Hillel and Shammai never became incensed with the opposing view. Hillel never turned to Shammai and said, you fool, you cucker. How dare you keep on opposing me on these things? Can't you see the truth
They
of what
never
I'm
became ad hominem.
And right. And as I said often, it never became a argument.
Right,
It
but
always
it
was a
didn't get
debate.
personal. They didn't take
Right.
it wasn't personal. It was
How do we know that
an
they never let it get
intellectual
personal?
belief.
What
in
is
their
the
position.
forensic evidence that they never let it get personal? Because they're arguing / debating on the next page of the Talmud. If they ever let it get personal, that would be the end of it. They wouldn't talk to each other. They wouldn't engage in each other. There would be no further conversation. They would each given the other one the silent treatment. They would walk into the Beit Medrash. They would see the other one, and they would walk in the opposite directions. And that would be the end of the discussions between Hillel and Shammai. The fact that the very next day they're right back at it means that Hillel deliberately sought out Shammai, and Shammai deliberately sought out Hillel, because Hillel says, I know the way that I do it, or I see it or perceive it, but because I want to understand the Torah the best way that I can, I am most interested in hearing your opinion, the one that's going to be the most opposite of mine.
That's the true definition of diversity and inclusion, not the
Correct.
fake stuff that's going on today.
Correct. And importantly, it comes from an incredible sense of humbleness and humility. Humbleness that I'm not the be-all end-all. The way I know it and the way I understand it doesn't mean that is the only way to know it and understand it. B, more than I want that I should be right, I want to know the way it properly is. Or in a case of a cause, like back to Avram Yitzchak, now the case of understanding a piece of Torah law, like with Hillel and Shammai, but more into the cause, I know that there's the way I do it, and I do it well, and I advance the cause tremendously. But the cause is bigger than me. So that if there is a way to do it differently than me, and that could be as beneficial to the cause as my approach, then I welcome it being taken in that direction as well. Because it's not about me and my legacy and my ego, etc., etc. It's about the cause. So even if Yitzchak, you go and you don't can carry my momentum in the direction that I have done it, but you take it in an entirely different direction, and instead of in a sense touching as many people as possible, you're trying to touch people as deeply as possible. I'm on board, says Avram. Not only am I on board, I'm proud. And the Jewish people and the legacy and the effort, etc., the mission has been served by both of these approaches, because Yaakov ends up drawing from both. And Yaakov works with far more people than Yitzchak does, but affects them far more deeply than Avram does, because he learned both from his grandfather Avram and from his father Yitzchak. And if either one of them had been negated by the other, Judaism would be severely lacking. Mm. And this is key to the message in this parasha. Fascinatingly, that had today's Hayom Yom, today's entry into the calendar put together by the Rebbe, talks about the very same paradigm that existed in the two first founders of Hasidism. You had the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was a traveler. Baal Shem Tov traveled all over the place, and he touched people, many people. But he touched them, kind of, as we said, in like in a relatively superficial way, because he was too busy touching as many people as possible. He was traveling. And then the Maggid of Mizrich never left Mizrich.
Ah,
And what he did is, instead of working with thousands and thousands of people personally, he established his Chavraya Kadisha, the Holy Brotherhood,
Wow.
the pantheon of Hasidic masters that we all know. The Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, Nachman of Bresov, Aaron of Karlin, all the great names, and he invested in every single one of these people. So he approached it very different than the Baal Shem Tov, and each one of them was an absolute necessity for the mission of disseminating Hasidism. And so the point being that each one of us has to be distinct in knowing what is my particular direction. And we can't be chameleons and malleable and just whatever it is, because God tailor-made us in a specific way. And to ignore the specificity of Hashem's design for each and every one of us is to ignore our fullest potential. So we each need to know that there's the way I can do it that nobody else can. And to really, in a sense, invest in that direction, double down on it. And then you're going to come across somebody who's going to do it very differently than yourself. And your ego is going to tell you that person is wrong and he's a cocker, and if he doesn't listen to what I tell him in fixing, then he's being obstinate and wrong-headed and piggish, etc. And then you remember, Ela Toldot Yitzchak ben Avram Holy Yitzchak. There was nobody more committed to his mission than Abraham was. And then he watched his son take it in a radically different direction. And he turned around and said, that's my boy. That's my boy. And I'm so proud of him.
but
Because I have the capacity.
Chabad looks up to Abraham's method more.
But you see, that's the thing.
I don't think so. It seems that way, but I don't think so.
Maybe it's Jacob's. It's a combination.
No. I would say like this. I say it's entirely based on the circumstance. Yes, there's no doubt about it that the idea of going out and outreach, etc. But understand that a very large portion of Chabad are not shluchim.
Yeah.
There's more Chabad yeshivas than any other sect in Judaism has yeshivas. There's more Chabad yeshivas than there are Gerer yeshivas or Satmar yeshivas or whatever it is. Because once you bring somebody in, right, and now they're interested, teach me, right? What's the next step? Get them into a place that can start drilling down into them. It's also necessary. Each element has its own value, and we ignore what somebody on the other end of the spectrum has to offer at our very own peril. And that is the very important message in this week's parsha. All right, everybody?
No, but I'm so sorry. Gotta go. Okay, you're done? Okay. Shabbat shalom.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No, Shabbat shalom. It's either way, it's time. But wishing everybody a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos. For those that are around, we have Rabbi Mordechai Ziv, who is the from Ascent Institute in Tzfat, and he is going to be here with us for Shabbos, a report from the front lines. He will share with us the spirit of Israel, and we're going to share with him our support and solidarity. So an effort to come out this Shabbos and partake in it, an Israeli Shabbos. All right, everybody.
Awesome.
And Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much. We will be there.
Absolutely. Great. Wonderful. We'll see you there.